Stephanie Huettner, Garden in the Wilderness.
Stephanie was the producer of Garden in the Wilderness. I'm Craig Whitney, and I was the director.
Do we have any other filmmakers?
Yep. Andrea Odesenska and I did Felt Feelings and Dreams in Kyrgyzstan, and it's my partner Polina Zaitseva did the animation.
Oh, that's great. Thank you for sharing. Tell me, what was the most difficult part of making it?
Should we come up there?
Yeah, you want
Please
to
do.
do
Please do. I'm conscious of the clock is ticking as well. Yeah, so tell me, what was the most difficult part?
The most difficult part was that truck. It just kept leaking down. It started leaking oil the second day of filming. We had to get it about 100 miles away the next day. It was filmed about 90 miles around Austin, Texas. So that 90-mile circle made it really fun to get that truck.
It was on 3 separate ranches. The opening ranch, and it was a separate one from where they're out in the meadow and he's giving you the check. That was a separate one, and then most of it was filmed on the interiors and exteriors were filmed on. About 80% of the movie was filmed on one ranch.
The Frankenstein Ranch.
Yeah, which was, it served as Connecticut and pretty much all of the exteriors where they're gardening and doing the laundry and he's doing work around it. It was all on one ranch.
Thank you. Tell me, how long did it take to make the movie?
It's kind of embarrassing. It just took so long to finish that film. Several years. Just because we kept raising money, and then had to go call back there to friends in Bishkek that were filmmakers to get me an interview from a man that was unemployed. Fill in the holes, if you will, to structure that story. So.
And tell me, how much money did you have to raise to make that movie?
And I started that film with a $30,000 grant, which is really not a lot of money. So it's like nothing, and especially to fly there and film and interview an ensemble of like 10 women artists. So we then started raising like a lot of goods and services and in-kind donations. So it's really very ultra guerrilla, super no budget. So we've seen some very highly polished.
Was that the same?
Yeah, it was pretty seat of our pants. I don't know. It's somehow we got it done, and you end up calling a lot of favors, and you end up making a lot of maybe not creative compromises, but technical compromises, just based on what the ideal version of the script would be and how to achieve that versus the reality. Like the truck. When it started having problems, I realized it was going to cost about $200 or $300 to get it to the ranch the next weekend, and I had a long think on the way home to decide whether or not I wanted to spend $300 to have the truck drive up in the field and the truck drive away from the tree and stuff.
Yeah, well, we got lucky with some things like I said, the one ranch was a wonderful guy named Gene who let us use it for, he's very hospitable. You can see him, he's in the hardware scene helping them load things. He was just incredibly helpful. He let us use, his kitchen is the staging area, and then pretty much every room of his house is in the movie. And we shot it on the red, and the guy who owned the red said, I'll pretty much let you use it for free if I can just, be there on set and work on the set to look over it. So we got lucky with things like that, and that sort of, it made up for things like spending, $300 on a truck that was basically just being towed.
For an hour. We had 1 hour with a truck for $300, I swear to God.
But it was just, it was one of those things we just thought it was worth it because it would have been really easy in Texas to get an F-150, but I don't think that's what that guy would be driving. So, so we just kind of tried to balance out the lucky things with, like you said, creative choices.
Is there any questions from the floor?
Yes.
What gave you the idea for this film?
I read an article in Atlantic about 6 years ago about a guy who worked as the the caretaker for the King of Afghanistan's private hunting estate. And it's just a really cool article. He's still living in this valley in Afghanistan with his family and his however many wives. And it reminded me a lot of Kubla Khan, the Coleridge poem. And it just kind of stuck around. And I was going to do another project before this. And the actor who I wanted was going to grad school in Colorado and wasn't going to be available for over a year. And I just decided it was too long to wait around. And so I thought that we'd just do this quick and dirty, and we'd shoot it on like an HPX, and it would just be this thing we knocked out. And it's like now 3 years later now, and we're still talking about it. So, you know, the best laid plans of mice are known, I guess.
Yeah. And obviously, we did not go to Afghanistan, so he just adapted it to Texas, where sort of similar, where sort of, you know, similar things are happening, where all of these ranches that, you know, old style family ranches that have caretakers are now, you know, there's urban sprawl just kind of taking over them. So it was kind of funny how that related so easily to Texas. But yeah.
Any other questions from the floor? Another one.
How did you find the artisans?
I had a friend who was in Kyrgyzstan on a Fulbright, and she's like, you have to come over here because this is a really cool place, and just bring your camera and come. I'm like, you know, movies don't get made that way. She's an experimental theater artist, and that's how she does her thing. So I went, and she got me out to the rural villages because she was collecting folklore and oral history for the theater projects. So I started getting access village by village by village, and I thought, well, let me stay with, this is kind of an interesting, kind of fascinating process what they're doing, and so I interviewed those women that way. And the grant is what got me a camera, not a red camera, but just at least a camera and the flight, and I went. But interestingly enough, when I came home with that footage, much to my horror, I went on the internet and saw like 10, or maybe not 10, I'm exaggerating, but maybe 5 perfect little 2-minute movies on YouTube on how to whip, you know, exactly that process, the whipping of the wool, like from like places like Lonely Planet, like eco travel, we'll take your money and you can come there and live in a yurt. So I'm like, now I'm really done, you know, because I'm like, somebody else already made this movie, and so I decided to start researching the culture and the folktales and the proverbs, and I thought, let me take this, and then I sat with 2 translators for a year to translate the 25 hours of interviews, and then I thought, you know, their life stories are what's interesting to me, and the behind the scenes is much more interesting to me, and that's kind of how it happened. It was like making a movie backwards. I don't recommend it. It's painful, but I'm so happy I finished it. So.
Do you do a lot of camping after having stayed over there? I can imagine the living conditions were.
You know, this place is a fascinating place. They don't have, all the villages had no running water in the house. You had to, in the morning, you go get your water from the village well. But, okay, everyone's getting a cell phone, everyone's getting a dish. I walked into one house and the homes look like that with the outdoor kitchens, and the fuel is dung bricks from horses. And that's what you cook with. It's actually all very eco, but I walk into one house and the kids were watching Ice Age. So I'm like, you know, like it's like you got 1 foot 200 years ago and 1 foot in now. And so I think in a way, that's what's interesting about trying to preserve what they're doing is fascinating. And you can go online and get a yurta tent from them. They're now making this stuff, and you know they have a rep that takes their work to like big shows in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And so it's cool to me that they're kind of making a living. I don't know, that was so long-winded.
If I could just say, you know, you're just talking about people have this expectation that when you make a film, you just kind of show up with the camera and that's it.
Yes.
And you know, you ask people to let you film at their house or whatever, and it can be a huge displacement on their lives. Like I've had problems with that before with people who didn't fully understand it. And Gene Smith, who owned the ranch where we did most of our filming, just couldn't have been more hospitable and made so much of the movie possible. And I don't know, whenever I think about Gene, I always think about something that Jack Nicholson said about Stanley Kubrick, that everyone's pretty much in agreement that he's the man, and I still think that that underrates him.
Yeah,
So-
and Gene unfortunately passed away soon after the film was completed, but his daughter Lisa is here, so, but yeah, when you have someone like that, he made so much of that movie possible, so,
Well, to
yeah.
both of you, thank you for sharing the movie.
Yeah.